What are wetlands? Wetlands are distinct ecosystems filled with hydric soil that separate water and soil distinctly and have an ecosystem with different vegetation and aquatic life that is unique only to the particular set of wetland.
We have to distinguish where those ordinary people live. If they live at Kariba, they have a different view of a wetland. They see a big lake as a result of the wetlands in the catchment working to fill up that lake. We have people living at Victoria Falls, watching the river come over there. That's a wetland. We see people at Mana Pools or Chavero. They all have a different experience. Our experience here is the beginnings of all of those wetlands. So these are headwater wetlands. Looking at these wetlands, we see grass in the summer, we see dry grass in the winter, we see seasonal wetlands.
Wetlands are very important to the state of Harare because they preserve water, they help us cleanse our groundwater, they are a tourist attraction because they harbor animals, birds, fauna, flowers.
In our definition for wetlands, we include lakes, we include rivers, and almost all water bodies. So in those water bodies, there are species that take the wetlands as habitats. We look at examples such as fish, ducks, and other plant species that can only be found in wetlands.
Basically, wetlands are these areas where there is temporal and permanent surface water, and this one where we are at, it's a seasonally indebted wetland.
My understanding of wetlands comes from the Ramsar Convention of 1971, which defines a wetland as an area of marsh, peatland, fen, which is either containing water that is flowing or static. The water could be fresh water, salt, or brackish. It also includes areas that are adjacent to the wetland.
Wetlands are very important in the, on the basis that in Epworth we rely on underground water. So with underground water, for it to be replenished, it needs wetlands. So if we destroy the wetlands, then we don't have a base where water is harvested in Epworth.
So we need to preserve our wetlands. Once we destroy our wetlands, we are destroying our underground water, and in the end, we won't have enough water.
Wetlands are important for an infinite number of reasons. Firstly, they provide water purification. When water flows from upstream going downstream and passes through a wetland during the course of its flow, it requires significant water treatment processes that only a wetland can provide. For example, when you have water coming from industrial and agro processes that include nitrates and phosphates within it, these nitrates and phosphates can only be oxidized and removed by the aquatic and subaquatic life forms that are found only in wetlands and nowhere else. The water purification also extends to the destruction of bacteria using aerobic processes. It extends as well to the sedimentation of excess dust and particles, heavy particles that are found in agro-based water. For example, when you have water coming from our central business district, it has a lot of dust, it has a lot of heavy particles. So these dust and heavy particles put a heavy strain on our water treatment processes. So instead of that water going straight to, for example, Morton Jeffrey and being treated there for sedimentation, it is then sedimented along the way through the course of a wetland and gets to the water treatment plants with less heavy particles, less bacteria, and less nitrates and phosphates.
Wetlands also prevent flooding. When it rains, a lot of the runoff water goes into the wetland. And most importantly, because of what we're seeing world over, there's a reduced level of fresh water. So the wetlands purify the water, and they also begin to supply the rivers with the water in the drier seasons. So that's what I can say is most important about wetlands. So that's why we need to protect them.
So that function, that ability of the wetland to draw in excess water, it means that it can therefore act as a buffer in the event of flash floods. I'm sure because of climate change, you might be familiar with the issue that most of our cities have been affected by wetlands, especially here in Harare, where large amounts of rainfall, when there's a lot of precipitation, then there are some flash floods. But the wetlands then come in as that buffer, which helps in that regard, so that if the wetlands are functioning well, those flash floods can be avoided.
It's a landscape issue for Harare, and it's difficult for residents to see that there are wetlands there, and most of them don't need to know that they are. They need to have decisions made on their behalf that these areas are no-go areas for water provisioning. So it's a very complex issue, but the main thrust of the issue for Harare's residents is that they are sitting in the source of their water, in the headwater wetlands of the city that flows under their feet, past them, all part of the system that works together very many kilometers apart, and long ecosystems that create the streams and feed them all year round, so that the water which gets into Lake Javero is there to pump back for us to use. And if we destroy them, then we are going to have water challenges. We have already, because we've destroyed most of the wetlands. But how do people relate to these wetlands? Mostly they get on there and cultivate, which is one of the worst things that they can do.
Mavazua, when it was built on the wetland, and they destroyed the wetland. The wetland which was here, it had a pond which they had to close up with sand so that they would destroy it. But you know, with nature, it still comes back, and nature never forgets what it has been doing before.
Sadly, or unfortunately, people don't know the value of wetlands to that extent. We've seen a lot of development projects are beginning to increase. So when development begins to increase, we'll see the increased need for land, land for housing, land for schools, land for roads. So there's a lot of reclamation of the wetlands, people constructing on wetlands. So that's the serious case that we have.
So we always remove illegal structures. Now we have more than 20 court orders that empower the city to remove the illegal structures, most of them which are on wetlands, because we want to preserve our wetlands for prosperity, for the future, and for our water.
We do not put an economical value on our wetlands. So when someone says, I want to come and build on top of a wetland, we only look at the theoretical things, how beautiful the wetland is, the flora and fauna that's found particularly in wetlands. So when someone threatens to come and build on top of a wetland, we turn a blind eye to those things because they don't exactly matter to our government and to our local authorities. What matters is the money. But if you put a financial figure on how much a wetland is worth, then people are going to be deterred to build on top of a wetland, because no one will want to lose that amount of money just because we want to build a small-time project. Create small-time employment instead of creating long-term investment.
The correct way of protecting these flare was that we should just leave them to be natural as they are, without planting gum trees in them, without building houses in them. If people understand that the water they drink, which is underground, is coming from the flare, they will protect them.
That is the duty of EMA and City of Harare, to educate communities about wetlands, and they should physically go to these wetlands where the communities live, the immediate wetlands where these communities live. I know it's a bigger stretch of ecosystems, and educate them about these wetlands. And also communities should form at least community-based organizations where they come together and decide to take stewardship of those immediate wetland ecosystems that are near them, so that also to make submissions and to the authorities to protect these wetlands. We've got communities in Harare where they've come together, and they've got formed groups specifically to take care of wetlands, and they've been doing wonderful work over the years, whereby they'll make submissions and petitions to the authorities to protect them.
According to the Environmental Management Act, it's prohibited to drain and to disturb any wetland in a manner that may cause adverse effects. So we as the environmental management are responsible for the enforcement of that particular legislation.